guys, it's Ryan Fowler with the Inner Game Group today, Inner Masculine Live. We have a interesting show today. We have a clip that is actually a little tough for me to watch. We'll get into it later. We're going over common misconceptions about subconscious trauma today. And I got to hand it to him. Jon MLD is featured in this clip with JustPearlyThings. And man, he handles this so exceedingly well. He handles it way better than I could have. But we have the Inner Game Group here. We're all going to comment on this, give our take. So introduce yourself, guys. Tim, Gary, then Jordan.
Yep, I'm Tim Costello with clearthattrauma.com, and I help you actually clear the things that we're going to talk about today, and hopefully you understand them a lot better when we're done.
All right, Gary.
Hey, my name's Gary with bigmindshifts.com. If you guys have social anxiety and you constantly feel judged and you're constantly overthinking and you just want to quit that whole process, I'm a really good person to talk to.
I'm Jordan Kurtz with Jordan Kurtz Hypnosis. I'm the belief engineer. We help you end your limiting beliefs to unlock your full potential in life.
Okay, and I am Ryan Fowler with innermasculine.com. And yeah, deep core, self-belief. We get all the bad beliefs out tied to painful feelings, which is trauma. Core subconscious stuff out. We put the best ones in, subconscious optimization, mindset, self-talk, all of that gets you firing on all cylinders. And so we're going to dive into this today. Very interesting clip. But first, you can see in the lower left hand of my screen, innermasculine.com/free ebook. You can go there and put in your email and you will immediately get a free ebook, 1 hour read on how your subconscious mind works and why it keeps you stuck. And everyone's heard of our subconscious. Most people know it's incredibly important. If not, just Google. Go ahead and Google how important is the subconscious mind. Google what % of our decisions are made by our subconscious. And that'll pretty much set it straight. And the vast majority of behavior determined by our subconscious. This is going to explain to you how the subconscious mind works, why it keeps so many people stuck with anxiety, procrastination, self-sabotage. Not only that, unresolved anger, resentment, bitterness, rage, feeling not good enough, not believing in yourself, not believing in your ability and value, and not going out and getting the good things you really want in life. So what is that all about? We want these things. Why don't we go out and get it? What is holding us back? What's keeping us stuck? Well, you're going to see the blueprint, the foundation, the fundamentals of how our subconscious mind works. You're going to be able to then see it working in your life. And that is the first step to, once you understand it, then you can master it. And once you master it, you have this supercomputer working for you. It is awesome. We all know from experience because we've done it for ourselves and massively up-leveled. We want to share that with you. So without further ado, I guess we should just dive into this clip. Does anyone, Jordan, you're the, you're the guy who came up with this clip. You want to maybe set it up first for what we're going to be watching?
So it's taken from the JustPearlyThings podcast that MLD was on earlier in the week. And I often listen to those podcasts and got about 2 hours in and they started discussing trauma, and which is, of course, right up all of our alleys. And yeah, some of their and right away, literally the first couple seconds of what we're going to play, I started shaking my head and I said this, and they go on for about 20 minutes. And I thought it was a good discussion for us to comment on because we couldn't be on the podcast to actually provide some context to what they were talking about. So we're going to do it today.
Yeah, now Jon MLD is on this clip, and Jon MLD does have a pretty good understanding of inner game. He is of your inner world, your subconscious. He's kind of a champion of it. He has the Inner Game Healing Summit that I present on, that they have. It's a straight week, 5 webinars each night, 4 times a year. And man, he really does a good job explaining this. But this clip is going to just show, I mean, a lot of these people are young people, but the whole reason we have a show is to dispel these misconceptions and educate people so that they can actually start fixing stuff, up-leveling their life. So let's go ahead and start playing the clip. It's at I'm going to play it at 1 1/4 speed, and I think that'll be fine, just to get through a little quicker. But here we go. Okay.
But that's what happens when you have these traumas and you do not heal them. Then what ends up happening is you just keep on getting on this loop of self-sabotage and destruction. Go ahead.
I think people in the Western world use trauma as an excuse. There's no such thing as trauma in the Western world. If you
Anyone want to say anything already?
Right there.
There's no child abuse in the Western world. That doesn't happen.
Well, you know, one of my initial thoughts for this whole clip is that I hear 3 different types of trauma. I'm not sure that's the right word. 3 different definitions of drama being discussed. I mean, trauma. Jonathan has a perspective. He understands what that subconscious trauma is.
Yep.
The guy that's over to his, wherever he is at King or whatever his name is, he has an idea, a little bit of that toxic masculinity idea, like shut up and just get working kind of deal, right?
Yeah.
Where trauma is just an excuse, just a lame reason for you not to do something, which is a little tiny nugget of truth in there. And then when you get over to the couch on the ladies, they're all talking about a traumatic event or a mishappening with some guy. So they've got 3 different types of trauma that they're all talking about, or 3 different definitions.
Yeah, and to his credit, watch Jon MLD back in 2019, 2018 compared to now. Big difference because he has done a lot of inner work and really up level, but we'll keep going.
go to their countries that experience real trauma and the people are not overweight, bro. I just don't believe in that. I think it's a crutch to remove accountability from people and to give people an excuse to not do what needs to be done.
But have these people got access to food? Easily accessible?
Yes,
That's the question.
Yes. Africa is not a jungle. Africa
I don't think you just
No, but processed food, certain foods. No,
but like
I'm from Bangladesh. My parents
but
are.
the way people approach their problems is different.
Yeah,
agreed.
But can I ask you this? King, you came from a fully intact family, mother, father.
Yeah,
that was good. See, I think that's the problem because a lot of the Western shit is like the families are like we have all the money in the world, but the families are so broken.
Yes.
And then you know, because there were 2 girls on a podcast I was at recently, right?
Yeah.
And one girl was like, my father was present from 0 to 13, very normal, very beautiful girl. And another girl was like, my father was present. Well, like my stepfather was present from 13 onwards, and she was just permanently angry. So when in these developmental these developmental parts of our lives, because in America, women are incentivized to throw the father out from the children being 1, 2, 3, and then you're growing up with this empty position of a father.
Fathers used to go to war. Do you know what I mean? Like they used to be gone. But that's what I'm saying. Like it just
But they did go to war, but the mother wasn't at home. Like your father's a fucking loser. And if you didn't realize these are a lot out there like fighting for the country, like the most masculine esteemed thing you can do.
But I'm not saying trauma doesn't exist. I just think like 80% of the time when I hear
all right, let's have her finish this one thing about 80%, and then we'll comment.
Yeah, let's get back to.
I will say this. I'm going to push back.
Okay.
To the Just Pearly Things comment. Yeah, but men went to war. When men went to war, there was a very, very tiny percentage of men of the whole population going to war. So I'm really not a fan of these blanket statements of men went to war. Like we all just left one day and went to war.
Yeah, all the men left.
Right, all the men left. I mean, at its highest, the population of the 4 armed services of the U.S. was 1.9% of the total population.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what the makeup is. Maybe it's 60-40. I don't know, but maybe it's 70-30. But so that means 1.5 million men were not in their home. Some of them didn't have homes. Some were young kids, you know. So I don't buy this men went to war thing. I don't really like blanket statements because that sets up the wrong premise for discussing this trauma. And Jonathan was on the money talking about us having all this money in the Western world and families being broke because we're so distracted with so many other things going on that we forget our children.
Yeah, one comment I'll make is throughout this show, you see people saying stuff that sounds good to them that is apt when you stop and think about it or even do some Google search is so far from what the data and facts say. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah.
Like case in point, Just Pearly Things. Yeah, a pretty dumb statement. And I don't think she's a dumb girl, but they're doing off the cuff statements that are just not in line with. And then the guy before that, oh, there's no trauma in the United States. It's all just an excuse. And yeah,
Not
there's
one.
blatant
Not one.
galore. not a single. There's no RAPE. There's no child abuse. There's no homelessness. None of that exists in the U.S. Therefore,
Not one bit. Not one bit.
Trauma. And so,
Disclaimer: this is all false.
It's like no one's perfect. I've spoke off the cuff and said dumb stuff before, but this is just like a master class in speaking off the cuff, blanket statements that completely. It's a master class in saying dumb stuff. It really is. But we'll keep going. Anyone else?
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that, just because there's trauma in your country doesn't mean that like humans are humans. Like,
it's like,
you don't have any
one
area.
Our country has real trauma. It's like,
the trauma is a human experience. This notion that it can't be in, it's everywhere where humans are. This notion that it can't be in another country because it's more developed or not. Will certain countries face different kinds of problems? Sure.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I can't. It's such an. I will be generous and say maybe there's context to his statement, but he doesn't explain it. And I certainly, if I was going to make a point to say that the Western world and where I don't know where he's from.
Africa.
I think he's talking about his home country.
Yeah, Africa.
I don't know where in Africa, but if he's trying to make the point that he had different traumatic experiences in his home country versus the Western world, that's a more nuanced point. But I wouldn't come out and say Westerners have zero trauma. That's a very, no, that's wrong.
Yeah, Westerners have massive amounts of trauma, which is why we have an endless stream of people coming to us.
That's right.
That need help. We'll keep going.
Because you and Myron have the same position on this, right?
Man, Jon MLD just handles this so well, man. I could not do this well.
Actually,
But you and Myron
Jared,
will
did you want to
also.
say something?
Yeah. Real quick, Ryan. So I think a lot of these people, because I think about myself before I got introduced to this whole industry world, whatever you want to call it, right? And it's like I probably would have had a similar response, but that was obviously out of ignorance, and I never was in a position where I had to stress test my beliefs on all this kind of stuff. A lot of these people are putting up a wall so they don't have to go into the discussion.
That's
good reason.
And they don't really know what's going on, and it's from the outside in, it does sound woo-woo, especially if you're from the Middle East or anywhere else, similar in culture, right? And you're it's that whole idea of privilege is what was that? You can't see privilege if you have it.
Oh, this person has all this money. This person's the son of a billionaire. Therefore, his life is completely perfect. And it's he grew up and his dad was never there. That's not going to affect. That money's going to make up for that. Just an example.
Yep.
And the Eastern cultures are not lacking masculinity as much, in my humble opinion, right? And so it's a lot of the trauma language, especially around guys, is not going to be as strong because there's no room culturally outside of the West to talk about those things.
True.
Right.
Well, in some cultures, absolutely, yeah. 100%.
Great comments.
And I realize that, like I say, this is hard for me to listen to, but that's my own shortcoming in the fact that, with the exception of MLD, I just Pearly Things. How old is she? 26, 27?
Young.
Yeah, she's young. And I think these other guys are pretty young too. John, so they're just young people,
raised in very healthy, functioning families. I was severely emotionally abused, mentally abused, and physically abused for the majority of my childhood. And when you are undergoing these kind of things during your formative years, you have a traumatic outlook on life, period. It changes your perception. And I know it sounds like I'm coping, but I'm not. I'm telling you, and it's a hard thing for people who are not traumatized to look at this from an outside lens, because there's things you have to overcome.
I have a question. How much more traumatic can it get for a child to grow up in a situation where it's encouraged for you to be beat by your parents as discipline? Because that's how African kids are raised.
Okay.
And see, no one's saying there's not trauma in Africa. There's massive amounts. This guy,
So let me ask you this: how traumatic would it be for you to grow up never knowing who your father was?
I mean, compared to getting beat as a kid every day.
I got beaten too.
Okay, so what if you saw your parent?
I'm not, like he says, oh, I was beaten every day. I don't know this person personally, but I can't see that having no impact on your subconscious mind wherever you were raised. Just because it's culturally acceptable, that the subconscious mind is the subconscious mind. You don't get to just pick and choose what's traumatic and what's not. And so
you guys remember, go ahead. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Well, I think it was Gary brought up a point where they are trying to, I think Gary was spot on when he said they're trying to like rationalize, or they don't want to look behind that door and accept that they actually did have a traumatic experience. Oh, yeah. So they're trying to rationalize it away of this wasn't that bad. And I'm skeptical if you were sat down in a room with this guy who's I don't know his name. I don't remember his name. Whoever was talking.
I think they referred to him as King.
King, yeah. If you were to actually talk to him in person, I would put more money on that he actually does have some subconscious. I'm not criticizing. I'm just, from my own experience working with clients, I know that we've all helped clients who've had parents who have beat them and who have had to work through that. And so to say that he's not, my own experience with clients just tells me completely the opposite.
I agree with Jordan. This fellow, we don't know him. He's putting on a face for the crowd to be popular, whatever. That could be his validation. That could be his modus operandi to hide what he's really hiding. We don't know. I don't know who he is. But like Jordan said, based upon our experience, you can start detecting those type of things.
Well, I'll tell you, everyone on this show has some level of subconscious trauma. Maybe for some of them, it's just kind of moderate, but they don't even realize it. They don't even understand it. They may be like, oh, why do I have so much anxiety? Or, oh, I keep procrastinating. And otherwise they function more or less normally, but that's still subconscious trauma. It may not be super severe for everyone. But someone who's doing pretty good in life, but has some anxiety, has some procrastination issues, they can come to me and afterwards they're like, gee, I don't procrastinate anymore. Why? Well, because you had some trauma. It may not have been super severe, but it was enough to make you procrastinate, to give you anxiety, to hold you back in some ways that you're now not held back in. So everyone on this panel, and Just Pearly Things, I think later on she actually mentions you went to therapy and it sucked, which is a lot of mainstream therapy does. Well, she wouldn't have gone there if there wasn't something she was struggling with.
That's right.
But we'll keep going. Yeah, everyone here, guaranteed, has some level.
One of your parents get beaten by your other parent as a child.
But
So how could you not say that that trauma would affect somebody and you'd use it as an excuse? Because if you've seen that.
I know different types of trauma affect different kinds of people. Yeah. But I think the problem is we blame the trauma and we remove accountability.
Yeah, you choose how to react from that.
Because there are children that come from the same home where the father was abusive and one goes on to be successful in life and one has a completely useless life.
Can I jump in?
Sorry,
so that's something worth commenting on. You can have two kids, one's very successful, one has a useless life. What do you that actually happens. I did a session for a guy just last about a week ago where that exact scene happens. What do you guys think happens when you see families like that? One kid goes, takes off, the other struggles.
I have a woo-woo answer for this.
Go for it.
That's actually how it's supposed to be designed.
How so?
Like you're not supposed to have all these people who are the same in your family. That's not how it balances out, right? Like you need opposites. And so
you have black sheep and golden child.
I know I'm going in the like whatever power you believe in is creating that balance naturally within the family dynamic, in my opinion.
Yeah, you got personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, even if you have, you know, like I'll just give you an example of my own. Like, I have 2 younger brothers, right? We have both parents, all that good stuff. Like, everyone's fairly successful, right? Everyone's making 6 figures plus. But we couldn't be more different.
Correct.
Right. And like anybody with kids, I think would agree, like they're not the same, you know? And so to like be like, well, one kid's doing this and like the other kid's like, nah, like, well, yeah. I mean, you're not supposed to all be the same person. In fact, if it was that way, life would be pretty damn boring, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
But he contradicts himself.
Yeah.
By saying literally what he just said, which was you have one child who isn't traumatized and the other is. And I think he actually says it. He says different trauma affects different people.
They actually can both be traumatized.
Which is a correct statement, but then he doesn't seem to acknowledge how that contradicts him by saying the Westerners don't have any trauma.
Yeah, he just throwing stuff out there.
Yeah,
he's just throwing stuff out there.
Yeah.
Jordan, I correct me if I'm wrong. I think you're okay sharing this because you have before. You're kind of one of those were you valedictorian or co-valedictorian?
Yes, I was valedictorian.
Valedictorian, and yet, you know, you came to meet at a session. You had some stuff you had to get out of you. Can you maybe briefly talk about that? Being the super success, you can be super successful and also be very traumatized. And I'm not saying you're very traumatized, but
it felt like at the time it was like I only got validation from my accomplishments. Yeah. I only had value if I was achieving at a high level, and so it was it's an endless void because you can't fill that personal value with external things.
Yeah.
So that's what I think you helped me. The big breakthrough I had was realizing that I didn't have to connect my personal achievements to my personal worth. And I think that, and you explaining that it's the reverse order. It's people who believe in themselves and believe they have value. They manifest their life in the world according to that belief.
Yeah.
Rather than, and that was such a profound change. I mean, there were other things that you helped me work on, but that was the first kind of nut that we had to crack, was understanding and getting over that.
A little bit of dirty fuel achieving that as well.
Yeah, and there's Teresa Kuhn, who I do a show with every Friday. Same thing, very, very high achiever, lots of internal trauma, and she's fixed it to her credit, and she's it's really helped her. But for those of you, our audience, who wants to do a deep dive on family dynamics, get Jon Bradshaw on the Family.
Yeah,
good book. They're different family members, especially the children the mom and dad, the roles are kind of just there as mom and dad. The children can be assigned different roles, and in dysfunctional families, these roles can be very rigid. It's like, no matter what you do, you have this role. One of the roles in a family is the black sheep. And everyone's sins for the whole family can be put on the black sheep. He can be the scapegoat and gets all the blame for everything that goes wrong, no matter what he does or she does. They're just trapped. They're given that role. And then you can have what's called the golden child. And this is the one the family wants to present to the world, to show the world how great the family is. And these can be very high achievers, but also they can be in a bit of an emotional straitjacket, have a ton of pressure on them to perform, et cetera, and they're traumatized, but in a different way. So for you guys who really want to understand this, read Jon Bradshaw on the Family, and it'll just, you can absolutely have a family where one kid, is the black sheep, the other's the golden child, both are traumatized. So anyways, we'll keep going. Kurt Cobain did really good in life until he self-deleted himself. Same thing with Marilyn Monroe. They were both fantastically successful. Same thing with Robin Williams. Wow, he was doing so great. Everyone was so proud of him until he self-deleted. Trauma is there. It's hidden. We go through our lives seeing stuff on the surface, we don't see what's happening behind the scenes. If you have my job or the job, you know, where you're actually, people come to you and you're helping them, then you get an idea of what people are struggling with. But man, just going around observing people surface level, you guys just, we just don't know looking at the surface.
You're not going to look if you don't feel any, if you don't have a problem, right? Which is why so many entrepreneurs get into this space, because it's like they're confronted with themselves every single day.
Yeah.
Right? And when you work for yourself and you have to notice all your own problems and all your own inconsistencies and why you sabotage on Tuesday and not right? Like it's like it forces you to put a focus on what the problem is. And after you go through that gauntlet of therapy, as Ryan knows very, very intimately.
I can't relate to that.
Jon
at all,
MLD is going to mention me on this
I
clip.
think
by
you're
the
just
way,
making stuff up. I have no idea what you're talking about. I think you're just completely on a limb.
All right, we'll keep going.
But a lot of people that I met who have seen stuff from childhood, I'm sure they either carry it on or they express it in another way, in an unhealthy way.
This is all irrelevant. This is absolutely irrelevant. It doesn't matter how you become traumatized. It's about how you hit your rock bottom that forces you to go backwards. The trauma is irrelevant.
That's completely ignorant statement.
I don't even know what she's trying to
it's
say
just like the amount of just absolutely completely wrong, incredibly ignorant things said on this show is just, it's off the chart.
What's her point? She's just saying things.
Yeah, these people are just spouting stuff. They have no idea what they're talking about.
I don't know. That didn't make any sense.
Matters.
We'll keep going.
We're saying that sugar is a drug, right? What happens to drug addicts? You have a sponsor and your sponsor might say, you know, you do like a day or two clean and it's, you know, well done, congratulations. And then they get back onto the drugs, they relapse, and their sponsor or the expert says, their support worker says, you haven't hit your rock bottom, because they haven't. It doesn't matter what your trauma is. It matters what stops you from going down.
So I definitely, I wouldn't say I disagree with you on that in the sense, because I exclusively run a community of traumatized individuals, and our main goal is to overcome the trauma. Because here's the thing: if you don't overcome your trauma, you're going to get caught in a pattern of self-sabotage. How you earlier were mentioning that, you know, people who may have gained a lot of weight, they'll lose 100 pounds, but they're still traumatized in their head, and their subconscious mind is still traumatized. So they will rebound upwards because they're going to match to what's going on here, because you have to come to closure with your trauma. That's what hold on, wait. That's the goal of all psychological training is. It's catharsis. Do you know what catharsis is?
Yeah.
Catharsis, you should look this up. Catharsis is emotional release, and which is coming to closure from your troubled past, your trauma, and all those things. And that's why you see somebody who, like, how many people?
But don't you think it goes back to still the person though, and what you choose to do with it instead of the trauma? Because it's like, again,
but then that's what
let me finish. Okay, it's like that girl came back from like North Korea.
Yeah.
Haven't you seen that? Where she came out of North Korea. She literally was sold as a sex slave to get out in China. Yeah. And she came back and she's like, they were telling her to go to therapy. And she's like, I don't even understand this. She's like,
that's out of context.
And then she's talking about how her roommates like were going to therapy over their cheating boyfriends. She's like, I just don't understand this.
So the reason roommates
like, so like, isn't it based on, like, I just think it's based on like the person, you know, because I'll know people that like they're like he was saying, they're siblings, and one will turn out great and one will go crazy.
Yeah, and then it goes back, but it does go back to the trauma. I'm telling you, it's a big thing right now, and that's why people are so fucked up. And what Pam was saying is true. Like, your environments can keep you trapped in your trauma too, as well. Because like, you know, historically speaking too, because another thing is this: not every therapist is a good therapist. First of all, they just did
that is so true.
Bingo.
There's so many crappy CBTs, and even there's a lot of crappy hypnotists out there. EMDR. There's majority.
And he makes a good point. He makes a good point coming up.
If you want to, well, we can talk about what Pearl just said there, because I think.
Go ahead.
What?
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, because she talks about that girl from North Korea. I'm like, I would be shocked if she doesn't like. Well, she said a couple things there. I'll try and break it down. One, she said, I don't understand why my roommates are going to therapy. Okay, but your understanding of that doesn't mean that their reasons aren't valid. And like she like the girl from I know who she's talking. I can't remember her name, but I know. Do you know who she's talking about? She's kind of some.
Yeah, she's talking about that girl that was on Jordan Peterson's interview.
Yeah,
some Moon Park or something like that. But she was in North Korea, came through China, and then into the U.S. Went to college, so on and so forth.
Like, and I understand. I would be shocked if she doesn't have any subconscious trauma.
Oh,
like,
you just know she does.
Yeah.
Like I can't, like, that's again, but I guess I'm coming from the perspective of having worked with subconscious. If you've never dealt with the subconscious mind before, and if you hear someone say, "Oh, I don't understand. I was from North Korea and I don't understand why my siblings going to therapy." How can you take that? How do you take that perspective that there's nothing wrong there? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, just because you don't understand, that doesn't mean there's not something wrong. It means you don't understand.
I think Jon does a good job here of explaining earlier in the clip how people they might get healthier, but they're still messed up in the head. I think I like him explaining that. I thought he did a good job there. But yeah, I think, anyone else want to elaborate?
Well, I just want to give a little background on Jon MLD, who I know very well. He has a bachelor's degree in psychology. He was raised in a very abusive home. He's very open about that. He's talking about that earlier. I have fixed a lot of stuff for him. And his energy is completely different now. But he also leads a community of men in the hundreds who are trying to up-level their lives, and he sees their trauma, and he sees these guys trying to up-level and crashing and burning, but then they get their trauma fixed and they stop crashing and burning, and then they take off and they keep taking off. So he knows from experience with his own abuse, with working with hundreds of men, with seeing them heal and get better or clear their trauma, get better. Same thing for himself, clearing his trauma, getting better, and having a degree in psychology. So he's really the only one educated on this panel. And the reason, I know I talk about my free ebook, but the reason I wrote it is to educate people so you're not, and actually say, oh, that's how my subconscious works, and I now see it working in my life. That's why I struggle here. That's why I struggle here. Now it makes sense to me. Now I really see what's going on. And once you understand how your subconscious works, it's going to expand your awareness. None of these people other than Jon ML, they all have very low levels of awareness of how subconscious mind works. Very, very, and it's called subconscious for a reason. It's not your conscious mind. It is kind of covered up. It is hard to figure out just by using your analytical, cognitive, conscious mind. So, anyways, we'll keep.
Doesn't work remotely the same either, and so it gets even more confusing if you.
Your subconscious works completely differently than your conscious mind.
But anything that you think you already know about your brain, if you've never studied the subconscious, just forget it. You don't know anything.
Yeah, 1%.
And
the other 99% is completely foreign and different from that 1%.
Yeah.
So
and it's really hard to believe that, because it's like, well, I use this thing every single day, and it's like, of course I make this.
You're aware of 1% of what you use.
But like, I'm telling you, if you do the little bit of research, like DYOR, right? You'll get to the same conclusions. Really.
DYOR, yeah.
All right, cool.
We'll never get through this, by the way.
We will never get through it because it's just so rich with I'm sorry. I know I keep saying they're ignorant, but it's pretty much the only way to say it. I'm sure they all have their positive points in other areas. What's up?
There's about 10 minutes left in the clip. We're not going
to be done to get their therapy license.
I would, as someone,
that's that point right there we just missed. These therapists, they go to school long enough just to get their certification, and for a lot of them, that's where it ends. They're now the expert.
Yeah.
I failed class. This podcast got too big.
There is some continuing education, but still, anyways.
But I did not pass. To be fair. But I literally, most of the girls in the psych department are nuts. Oh my god! I was looking at.
Now, some of what Pearl says is actually kind of true.
Yeah.
but we'll keep going.
I was just getting a psych degree.
I kind of agree with that. A lot of people who are nuts try and get a psych degree to sort themselves out. That's kind of true.
For fun. I wanted something easy. Ironically, still feels
Yeah. Yeah.
I was looking around. I'm like, these are the future therapists of America. Oh my
But it's not that the bitches in the sorry ladies, it's not that the women
He's learning.
the psych departments are crazy. They're all fucking crazy. Have you seen the elementary school teacher department? These girls railing coke on the weekends and going having a wild time.
But they handle business when it
what I mean?
comes to the children. And I want to say that your point, to my point, was not a valid rebuttal, because I said when you hit rock bottom, that's when things start to change. I'm not saying that you don't need closure from your trauma, absolutely, but you can only seek that closure once you hit that rock bottom. So I'm not saying that you don't need closure.
I agree.
Like, I feel like our points go hand in hand. I don't think that was a valid rebuttal.
That for me, so no, it wasn't a rebuttal. I'm sorry, it wasn't a rebuttal, but it was just adding on to the fact that, like, because I have seen people who've hit rock bottom and still didn't do what was necessary to change, which was to heal that trauma, to come to closure with it, right? But because I have dealt with people too who have hit, like I said, they had hit rock bottom, but they just that was the new home. That was the new home. They stayed there. You know what I mean? I personally have never hit rock bottom with my mental health, but I was miserable enough to be like, yo, this is something has to fucking change. You know what I mean? So that's my big thing, because I think if we're telling everybody, get out there and hit rock bottom, like, it's just not a good thing. It's not a good thing. But like what Pearl and King said too, there is an absolute truth to that, in the sense that we can't sit here and sit around and feel sorry for ourselves. In today's modern times, like I tell this guys, I said to all men, and I don't care what you have to say, but if you're a man and you're after the age of 35 and you're still financially struggling, it is 10,000% your fault, because there's every opportunity in the world. I personally have come from every low marker, abject poverty, physically abused, mentally abused, emotionally abused, everything. And I have made millions with my business. And so for me, if I could do that, if I could do that, I'm an exception to the rule, but I am saying that it's possible.
Do you think focusing on trauma makes it worse? Because What
do you guys think?
See, she is talking about a different trauma than Jon MLD is talking about. Jon MLD is 100% talking about subconscious trauma.
Yeah.
She just simply is talking about a bad event that you happen to be reacting to.
Yeah.
So they can't come to the right resolution, because she's asking a question for which he's thinking a different answer than she's expecting.
Well, yeah, their level of understanding is so low, it's bound to happen that they just constantly misinterpret. I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
You want to play the rest of what she says here.
Look at the results. Okay, I'm not saying there's no exceptions to this. And when I hear girls talk about trauma for years, they don't seem to get better when they're always talking about it. They seem to get worse.
That's an accurate observation.
Yep,
if you don't fix your trauma, it won't get better. You can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk for decades, and it won't get better if you don't do what you actually need to do to fix it.
In some circles, by the way, it's vogue to have a therapist.
Yeah.
And they'll do like therapy for years. I'm like, this is supposed to be like 6 months.
Understood.
Because that's the shortcomings of CBT.
She's right about that.
Doesn't fix your subconscious. It can partially fix your subconscious very slowly over time, and it can give you management tools which can help, and those are useful. But I think Jon MLD is going to respond here and actually kind of mention me without saying my name, but we'll keep going.
Yeah.
If I may, one real quick, I think this frustration that Pearl's experiencing, these observations, are why she has the opinion she does, because she doesn't realize hypnosis is the tool. Most people might get frustrated with the whole concept of trauma to begin with, like Pearl, like
Alex Hormozy.
Yeah.
He's like, I can't stand therapists. It's like, because you haven't seen it done right.
Yeah. And that's why we have to exist as a podcast and as a show, and to get that message out that hypnosis is that you need a subconscious tool to fix a subconscious problem. And that is why we are so important. And I think I would believe that if Pearl was introduced to the concept of hypnotherapy, that she would buy it. I think that
she had a session.
Yeah, this type
if he had a session.
This type.
Because that's the game changer for a lot of people, because they are frustrated with traditional therapy. That's how Ryan got into it. He was frustrated with traditional therapy. He wasn't getting any better. Or
Yeah, I
he
had
wasn't- he
100
wasn't
sessions
getting
over
better to the-
15 years, and it did get me better to a point, but the last few years did stop working. It didn't get beyond that.
Yeah.
I think Jon MLD, at some point he's going to mention the guy who did therapy for 15 years. That's me.
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Let's
let's let them like roll for a bit and then we'll comment.
Yes.
They haven't understood.
Okay, so
That's
okay,
why-
I just want to walk through this. So
listen.
I just want to walk through this. So if I'm in a single, I'm grow up, I'm in a single mother home. Okay, and the trauma was that I don't know, she hit me and she was abusive until I was like, say, I don't know, 15. Then I moved out.
Okay.
Now, like, what do you like? So we talk about it with. I just want to know step by step what
So
happens.
I want to just add something before you say something. The majority of therapists, their goal is not to get you better, is to keep you coming back to the next session.
Yeah.
First of all,
Yeah.
because the majority of therapists, this is why I didn't pursue
dropping truth bombs, man.
My doctorate in psychology. The average prescription that they give you in the United States of America is 12 weeks of therapy plus drugs. And I don't agree with that.
Does that mean that therapists here do not have that goal because it's like free, isn't it? We don't pay for our prescriptions or the therapy directly or upfront.
I mean, if the government's in direct control of it, I don't trust it personally.
Okay, so it's not money motivated in that sense. If you
Well,
put
I
in
think
a
it is
UK
money.
context.
It is money motivated because it's subsidized by the government.
Okay.
They said I should be on it. I was like, no, I don't want to take it. So it is a thing. It is a money making scheme, therapy.
But
all this.
you're only offered 6 sessions before you have
To be honest,
yeah.
I've been
just 6 sessions.
It's been about 3 years I've been waiting and I ain't had it, and I've just
you're waiting
okay, when you're going through something, it's best to not focus on it. Like, for example, when I came out of my trauma, I was like, okay, now I know, I can see patterns. This is what I do. This is how I am. I'm not going to do them. That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
so-
And I'm not going to also tell myself I'm trauma, like keep on moaning about it. Because if you have that mentality, it's impossible. But if you're going to say, do you know what? I've been through that. I'm going to forget it. Old me, new me. I'm going to give myself new habits. I'm going to go for it. It does work. It does change. Things change.
Step by step. So, okay, I was beat till I was 15. Now, what do you, so we go to the therapist and I say, I was beat till I was 15.
Are you affected? Are you affected by it in any way? Does it affect you?
Of course, that's what we're talking about. This example. So what they would end up telling you to do is you need to kind of, and it's uncomfortable, but you have to like relive those
gotta go back,
situations.
yeah.
Exactly.
You gotta go back.
You got to relive those situations, and then you need to identify your negative associations with that situation that happened, and then they teach you how to come to peace with it. Because a lot of people listen. That I knew that woman yesterday who mentioned that she was SA trafficked, right? And this happens a lot with women who are raped, SA trafficked, whatever. They don't really come to peace with what has happened to them. So that's why she was here, and she like had to continuously mention it to us. And we're like a group of strangers. Like anybody with kind of regular, functionalities about themselves would kind of keep that private. You know what I mean? If we were trafficked across a place or we were raped for 6 months in a row, but she had not come to peace with that. And that's also why when I asked her and we had a little bit of conflict, when people, here's a good way to understand if someone's traumatized. If you keep on trying to tell them something, they're like, keep on arguing with you. You tell them like, calm down, let me make my point. That's an indicator of a traumatized person.
Yeah, really? I think that's
This is all 100% here.
an indicator. I just think that's an
MLD saying.
indicator of an asshole.
No, it is literally it's their trauma.
They
Listen,
don't.
their trauma is built up and they can't even help themselves.
I could.
And they have to like come out and say these things over and over again.
I kept oversharing.
But so okay, we go back and I say, okay, this is what happened. She beat me, and then and what? So now they say accept it. I say, okay, I've accepted.
So they can accept it because when you're beaten, it's like it's literally broken into your mind.
In your mind, there's almost a point where you need to blame somebody or something.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that it's not your fault.
Yeah.
That you did not bring this on yourself. That was the other person's actions that you didn't have control over. So when you understand that part of the trauma and know that it was nothing that you could have done to prevent that, and it was not your behavior. You are not responsible for other people's behavior.
See, I don't know.
This is all cognitive, but we know with the latest neuroscience that trauma is trapped in the body. Read the book, Body Keeps the Score. It's been the #1 best-selling psychology book for 8 years now. I always forget his first name, but it's Vanderkolk. You can get it on Body Keeps the Score on Amazon. And so they're still talking cognitive. They're not even talking subconscious. And we work with the body. We work with trauma trapped in the body. They're just not even aware of how things work, except for Jon MLD.
This stuff might work, like it might, but it just, to me, like outside looking in, it seems nuts.
It's because you're not traumatized.
No, it's not, because it's because I do these shows and all these girls will tell me about their therapy, and then they'll still, like, everyone, like, because you guys, I know, but I'm saying, like, you guys were saying you guys are healed, but you both brought up your trauma on the shows and that you talking about it, which you said you wouldn't do.
Because it was context to the situation.
Which is, fine. I'm not, but it just doesn't seem to like match with what I see, like people getting better from this stuff. It might, I don't know, I've never gone through it.
I feel like
like it just seems like the majority of people go to therapy and they get worse.
No, so I would agree with you. And like I said earlier, traditional therapy is not the answer.
Right.
People, like, I have a friend, okay, and he went to 15 years of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, right?
That's me.
And he said it resolved about 5% of his traumas.
It is about 60% of my depression, of a little bit of my anger, and none of my anxiety. So maybe 20% over 15 years.
But once he started doing hypnotherapy and getting down to the core issues, because when you're traumatized, your subconscious mind, which controls everything about you, that is what is permanently damaged.
Yeah.
And once that's damaged, it produces a damaged person. That's why you'll take somebody who is addicted to drugs, right? You'll put them in the countryside of Wichita, Kansas. They'll be a farmer or whatever, but somehow they'll sneak out in the middle of the night and they'll find crack. Because at their subconscious mind, they're traumatized who they are. That's their identity. And and like I said, you were raised in an extremely well, healthy household. Same thing with Myron too. Like, you guys are both like, you both like say like trauma's not real and stuff. Even Tate too, right? You guys, all three, are like very similar in that sense. But it's hard for non-traumatized people to understand the reality of people who were, like, I was viciously beaten as a kid. Like, and this is not me trauma dumping, like, oh, feel sorry for me. But like, when I was like 8 years old, I got held up against a wall and I was hit repeatedly. I saw my blood splat up against this white wall, right? As an 8-year-old child, 9-year-old child. This happened for a couple of years, right? That shit fucks with your reality. It fucks with your permanent perception of reality. And people we're still at this point right now where it's just hard to understand these things. And it's hard to overcome them. I was lucky enough to come upon a group of people through my community as I started my YouTube channel. And if you watch my YouTube from now, watch me in 2019, 2020, I was like way more toxic, way more like unrefined than I am now. And so it's a very complex puzzle to solve. But if you do research into understanding the majority of psychological problems that are haunting people right now, it is trauma. And then the goal of all therapy is catharsis, which is emotional release, which brings closure to those traumas. You can kick me off now.
He just says it so much better than I could.
A group.
Any comments at this point? You want to keep going?
Yeah, I got a couple things. I think it's
8 more minutes and then wrap it up. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think when she's talking about like it's really hard to understand, and it's a lot of the reasons it's so hard to understand is because you only have an understanding of what the conscious mind is capable of, right?
Yeah.
You don't have an understanding of the relationship between the two minds. And so when you see people try to solve their problems and they can't do it, it looks like it doesn't work because it's like it's supposed to be this rational 1, 2, 3 logic chain.
Right.
But it's not. And it never did work that way because subconscious works on heuristics and emotional appeal and storytelling and metaphor and all this good stuff, all this
pattern recognition, analogy
stuff instead of rational system stuff. And so any rational person looking at this kind of thing is going to look at it like, this makes no sense. And guess what? It doesn't, it's not supposed to. That's the whole point. That's why it's so frustrating in the first place. Right over.
Yeah. Our logical brain does not fully come online till age 8. By that time, 75% of our subconscious programs are already in. When we're not even really logical till age 8. Kids do what's called magical thinking. We don't think logically as children. This is just established. Like, no scientist, no neuroscientist, psychologist will tell you different. They know this. This is mainstream. 75% of our subconscious is in before we even think logically.
Oh,
and our subconscious does not think logically. That's the logic part is conscious. Cognitive behavioral therapy. They're working on cognitive conscious to try and fix your subconscious. That's why it's so inefficient. They're working on one part of the brain to try and fix the other part where the issues are. What we do is we actually go to the part of the brain where your issues are and work on it directly after getting you in a state where you're open to the changes, the desired changes. So to up level. So we'll play a little bit more, and then we'll.
If I can add in real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
I just think that the whole conversation changes when you introduce the concept of hypnotherapy. And Jon touches on it, but if I was going to give some feedback to Jon, I mean, obviously I'm a hypnotist, so I'm biased, but I would have hammered home that hypnosis is the tool. You need to use hypnosis for this. I would have beat that into the ground, because that's the missing puzzle piece that they're all talking about valid criticisms about cognitive behavioral therapy, and they're all valid. But but the missing puzzle piece to this is understanding the subconscious, and the tool you use to address the subconscious is hypnosis. And if you can, and Jon says it, but I wish he would have nobody asks him about hypnotherapy.
Yeah, he says it clearly once, but doesn't really hammer it home.
And
let me add to Jordan.
But he does say, though, he says, I'm so much different from 4 years ago because of this. And it's true. He is like a walking testimonial, because just watch him 4 years ago and watch him now, and you're like, wow, he has really up-leveled something. There's a big difference in this guy because of hypnosis. Same thing for me, same thing for everyone on this group, except Tim. Somehow, Tim, you managed to be a rock star from day one. I don't know, but the other three people in this group were pretty screwed up at one point. So
let me make this point, and this is the scary part. If Jonathan had hammered down hypnosis is the answer, then everybody on watching this podcast, whatever in the world, would run out to go find their local hypnotist. And that local hypnotist would do, yes, I can help you lose weight, stop smoking, sleep better, that kind of stuff. And they're going to go do all that suggestive stuff. They're going to go to that pre-life junk, all that kind of thing. And they're not going to get fixed. And then that person's going to come away going, wow, hypnotism sucks. So
yeah, it's a certain type of hypnosis.
Right. Jonathan's
executed properly.
We probably need to train Jonathan, not that we need to do that anymore and he would receive it, but to say, look, there is a certain type of hypnotherapy, not your typical hypnotherapist out there, but a particular type where they clear the subconscious trauma, because everybody else talks about not smoking, gaining weight, whatever they do, right? But the key here is to find the right type of hypnotherapist. And how many of us in the world are doing this? 8?
There's probably more than 8. I'm sure there's
50.
It's just a minority.
It's a very tiny
know the
piece.
number.
Tiny piece of the whole pile.
Marissa Peer knows how to do it. Melanie Tony Evans knows how to do it. I have talked to people who went to. I have had clients who went to other hypnotists that did, kind of like half of what we do, and did help to a point. We did not invent the technique. Like my dive to the 5, I kind of sort of invented, although I took part of that from Marissa Peer and added to it. And, it's kind of a half invention. But like we do regression to cause inner child work. We didn't invent that.
Right.
But it's just when you do it a certain way, it becomes astronomically more effective.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I
think Jonathan did a good job staying at about the 5,000 foot level and try to educate this crowd here.
I see what you're saying, Tim, and that's a fair criticism. My thought, my counter to that would simply be that you have to introduce it to the equation. You have to at least introduce this idea that hypnosis exists. Now, you're very right that a lot of hypnotists don't do what we do. But I think if you could just start poking at the idea that hypnosis has the potential to fix these problems with the subconscious mind, that's what I want people to start thinking about and realizing, hypnosis is a possible tool to use. Like it needs to be entered into the conversation.
Yep. And that's why we have a show.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep. No argument. No argument at all.
I got to tell you, I was watching there's a good YouTube channel. The guy's just a main mainstream psychotherapist, but he's very good at psych hacks, Dr. Orion Taraban. And his, I'm at 550 something subscribers right now. Been doing it 4 months, and he has over 100,000 subscribers now. It took him 2 years. He said his first 10 months, he only had 40 subscribers. Kind of, It's like, all right, well, let's keep going for another couple years, at least, So, just keep going, and sooner or later, the message is going to get out and hit some sort of critical.
And quite frankly, I'm a little bit of a Jonathan MLD fan. I don't watch him a lot occasionally now, but this was his best performance I have seen in a while.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he just was so patient with these people explaining these concepts. Like, I would have lost my patience. He did a better job than I mean, I wouldn't have yelled at him or anything, but I probably would have face palmed or something.
Yeah,
I would have gotten a little frustrated.
The solution
because
to solving all this trauma.
Sorry, we'll keep going.
Things is not actually relieving it or talking about it. I think it's actually going out there and doing incremental steps towards
being proactive,
different things in terms of self-improvement.
I agree with the solution. But you can't poo-poo people's trauma, because everybody's got their own trauma and it affects them in their own individual ways. So I think it's the solution. Yeah, I agree.
But the solution is still the same.
Yeah, it is. But people's trauma is not.
Well, and I'm also tired of people that aren't really traumatized saying that they're traumatized.
How the hell does she know whether they're really traumatized or not? How the hell does she know?
Okay,
that's probably the dumbest thing she said. So, and she said some pretty dumb. Well, let's just say ignorant stuff so far. I know she's young.
It's real. Okay, what you were talking about, that's a real thing. But it's like these girls will come on. Oh, you got cheated on. Okay,
that's not real.
So did everybody.
Listen, here's another thing too. When it comes to trauma, right? Because that's a fucking new trend, like the TikTok trauma dump, right? There's a lot of girls, because listen, when you are a traumatized person, you want to be heard. You want people to tell you everything's okay, right? And so these girls vent on TikTok, and what do? What happens? They get the dopamine. They get the what is it? The validation. They get the dopamine validation, and then they're like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna be like fucked up trauma dump girl," right? But that's why you see these girls, like when you see the majority of these girls like Fresh and Fit, all this shit, and like they're just so rude, and they can't stop cutting off the host, because why? He says something that triggers her, and then she can't stop that emotional dump and emotional release because she's a traumatized individual. So that's my biggest thing. I am not saying for excuses.
How do you know she's not just an asshole?
See, and she Just Pearly Things here has a she's making an assumption that only a minority of people can be traumatized.
Things aren't mutually exclusive.
Oh, I got something on that.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm a copywriter by trade, right? During the day.
Yeah.
And so I work with words. And so when I see like a word issue, it really pisses me off. So like the trauma as a word, right?
Mm-hmm.
When a regular person hears trauma as a word, like I did the first time, my head was like, well, I wasn't beaten, right? And I wasn't around toxic parents, and I wasn't around. But the reality of the situation is anything can be traumatizing, right? It's just how you perceive it.
Our interpretations that are the actual trauma.
Right, at the age that you experienced it. So if you had something, if a dog, this is the example I always give, if a pit bull bit you at 3 years old and you bled all over the garden, right? And you remember that subconsciously, which you will, right? All of a sudden, as you grow up, you're like avoiding dogs. In fact, like even a small chihuahua is like making you hyper anxious for no reason. You're like, well, I'm 32.
But there is a reason.
I'm 32. Like, why am I still afraid of these little tiny dogs, right? And so it doesn't matter how it happens, as long as the child version of you or the younger version of you experiences something bad, right? And it's perceived as something that is going to affect you in the future, then you're going to react that way. It's just that simple.
And let me role play Pearl right now. Well, what if it isn't subconscious trauma? What if you're just a big coward and scared of dogs? And it's like, let's just make that blanket statement so we don't have to see what's actually going on. Well, maybe he's just there's zero reason that person's an asshole. There's zero reason. Mm-hmm. They just are.
That's their personality type. They were born an asshole.
Yeah, they got the asshole gene, And that's all there is to it. And it's like, yeah, okay, how do you know? So you're just gonna make this assumption.
Like there's always a bit of it, right?
Now we don't have to go any further. We can just say it's this way just because, and we don't have to go any further. We don't have to look any further, and we can stay ignorant and keep it simple. It's like, no, that's you know,
there's no benefit to that. No benefit at all to that, as is evident.
No benefit other than that you get to be intellectually lazy. That's the benefit.
On the money.
That's the benefit.
That could be it too. That can be it too. That could be it too. That could be it too.
We all do like attention.
Yeah, for sure. Aren't they?
For sure. Like, what is? I'm gonna give a trauma card, like real trauma card, where it only counts.
Oh, this is a real trauma card as opposed to the non-real trauma card.
All the non-trauma we've been talking up to this point. Yeah.
List if you think I'm being okay, but I only get the final say because this is my show. So I'll give you abuse. You know, that's real.
Yeah. Essay for sure.
Essay. Yeah.
Oh.
And witnessing a very horrific crime. I'll give you those three.
That's it.
In her expert opinion.
Good job.
In that
domestic abuse?
Well, at least
with their double doctorate in neuroscience.
So at least PhD now stand for piled higher and dumber.
Yeah.
But look, if those, well, she just explains her own opinion, her own views, right? If you only think those are the three things that cause trauma, then it makes sense why she says this isn't traumatized. If she literally only gives you those three, then of course I'd believe the same thing if I only thought it was those three things.
Yeah, just let's adopt a simplistic, closed-minded opinion, and that's our reality now. Great.
Yeah,
I'm sure reality will wrap itself around you and conform to your opinion.
You know what we really need to do is change the title of this to Reaction to Just Pearly Things Podcast, Common Misperceptions About Trauma. That'll get some views. It'll get some clicks.
Okay, I could change it.
I think the way that verbal abuse is used nowadays, no, because the way women use verbal abuse is very soft.
No, it's not. Come on,
dude. I think verbal abuse is probably the bigger component of all this trauma. I mean, because I remember
it's more common for sure, 100%.
I remember
and just as damaging can be.
That if I did something wrong, and my dad sort of gave me the look or the feel or the whatever, I wished I'd got beat because I could get that physicality done with, and I know where we're standing. But for him to ignore me or say things to me or something, man, that would be traumatic to me. It's like, let's just get it over with. Let's have a spank and get it done, right? But I think the emotional verbal abuse is paramount.
Now, I'll play devil's advocate for her now and say she's probably going to go to the example of, because she has this big divorce documentary that she made about how the courts treat men and stuff like that. And so her experience with this is like, okay, a woman will just say, just because a couple was arguing about something, mutually arguing about something, and she'll come, that the woman will be in court and say he was abusive because we had an argument. So she might be so I'll defend her in that might be where she's thinking of, like, is a mutual argument between two people really, abuse? So that she might be going, okay, you guys were arguing and she's overreacting to that thing. So I understand that's probably where she's going to take it. But again, it's overly simplistic. There's other forms of abuse that really do exist. That's not just
never stop
that.
Yep.
Yeah. And I see your point. There are a lot of false abuse claims.
That doesn't mean they aren't real. There aren't real.
Yeah, there's other abuse it doesn't invalidate real abuse, but there's false I don't know. I don't like to say grape. I want grape. There's false grape claims, there's false harassment claims, there's all sorts of false abuse claims. And then there's a lot of but then there's a massive amount of unreported abuse against men. Yeah, women, it's like they get the attention. The CDC says 50% of domestic violence is caused by women. 50% of the violence is caused by women. That's a CDC statistic. How often does that get focused on? Basically never, So, it's all over the place. But there are false accusations. Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of them.
Right.
Yes,
I do agree with you.
She's
on
like,
that one,
she's like, I agree, but it's hard. That's my opinion. The way most people use abuse today, but real abuse.
No, it's
but
true.
that goes back to like that's what I said in the beginning. I said assault or something like being hit, being abused actually. But and you know, verbally abusing a child, like as a kid, I think that's. But if it's in a relationship, you're allowed to break up. So
the verbal abuse from a child is strong because you know when you have these positions of authority, you're like, for example, I'll use my example. My aunt, right? She used to tell me like,
but if you're verbally abused as a child, maybe that's in your subconscious keeping you in an abusive relationship as an adult.
I don't agree with her
because that's how our
logic there.
subconscious works.
It's not abuse because you can break up. I don't.
Yeah, you can walk away.
I don't agree with that either.
It's not abuse.
I don't know. That's
just
like
doesn't understand how our subconscious works.
Hey, we do need to reach out to our viewers. Hi, Mike. Hi, Jay Lee, and hi, P Dubs. Glad you guys are here today. Let's continue on.
Yeah, good call, Tim. Let's see who all chimed in. Too many parents replacing emotional support with more financial support. I agree on that, Mike. Okay, so yeah, we'll listen to a few minutes more and then we'll wrap it up.
I'm trying to get to her.
Try to get to what?
I want to get to because Pearl's going to describe her own experience with therapy here in a minute, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's coming up in the lake fire forever because you're a bad little kid. And I was like 9, 10. I was like, bitch,
That's like
what are you talking about? Like, what did I do?
But your mom seems great though, so I'm sure she said
she's great now, but we had to overcome a lot.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Yeah, she beat the fuck out of me. She's from Trinidad, so she beat me like fucking like no other, you know.
Can trauma be like getting hit as a kid?
Yeah,
by your parents?
because it spikes your stress reaction points in your brain when you're being viciously beaten. So, but it's another thing too. If you're being beaten, it's one thing. But if you're being beaten and then on top of that, there's emotional abuse, like you're a little fucking shit, you're a piece of garbage, whatever. Like I do think
someone in the chat. This is $100 super chat. Thane is back. You know, we missed Thane. We're just gonna do Thane. He says Westerners crutch is trauma.
Westerners.
What does he mean by that?
And he paid $100 to say that ignorance.
Yeah, there's that's why we have a show. You know, we show clips of scientists talking who know what's really going on, who have data. I mean, I show that on my show. You know, I wrote a book on, you know, the subject, which is backed by science, and the results we get. We have people come to us and we get them massively better very quickly. So we're trying to educate people. And I guess the point of this show is how much ignorance there is out there about what trauma really is and how our subconscious mind really works. Because people just, your average person probably really just doesn't understand, unfortunately. And man, if people understood what we knew and then used it in their lives, it would probably solve about 90% of the world's problems. And I'm not kidding. Would you guys agree?
Yes.
If everyone had good subconscious, not 100%. I don't know, maybe 80. It fixes a huge amount.
A huge amount, and it also, we'd actually have a society.
Yeah, we'd have society where people trusting each other, we're trustworthy, etc., and very much more productive, successful, etc.
You know, like being
more stable families. Massively more stable. And we'll keep
a kid to the point of blood. Okay. But like sometimes it's like my mom beat me with a spoon.
Yeah,
like,
I got a spoon.
And like, I got that too.
For swearing, my dad, when I was about 10 years old, I would run underneath the dining table in the living room, and then I'll go, haha, you can't get me, and I would literally run to his bedroom, try and lock the door. He got in. And I got soap all in my mouth.
Okay, but imagine if like a therapist comes in and says, "Let's relive this trauma."
No,
but that's what they do is they start to like convince you that you're I did a couple therapy sessions and I just got so irritated.
But Pearl, so I want to push back for you. And so you were disciplined by your mother, right? But you were also, and King, you too, right? You were disciplined by your parents, but you were also loved by them, right? A lot of these situations, it's just every day, come home and take it out on the kids, take it out on the wife.
Yeah.
And these
I disagree. I think that's a minority of the situations. I think most parents.
He thinks too much. That King guy thinks way too much. I think that. I'm like, guys, shut up.
You just don't know the data, man. The data is much worse than he thinks.
Pearl is right in saying that she was frustrated with that.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't like this idea that I just go into therapy, and she's she's accurately describing the problems with cognitive behavioral
Yeah,
therapy.
a lot of it sucks. That's
Yeah.
why Alex Hormozy got frustrated, and we
Yeah.
looked at a video of him being frustrated with therapy. Yeah,
Right.
100%.
Yeah. But I'm talking about my situation and the traumatized situations, which are the rarer situations. Because your parents typically, the average parent is not just gonna beat your fucking ass.
No.
Because if they have a conscience, they're gonna feel bad. They're like, oh, I beat your ass, but like, here's some ice cream.
I just noticed whenever there's like criticism of a person, or like you kind of have to look in the mirror, a lot of people just use like they blame it on the trauma instead of the person, and I think that's what King's getting at.
Yeah,
is a lot of times it just becomes like an excuse.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. But
the trauma is part of the person.
You're talking about the majority.
Yeah, I do think, listen, we do have power to fix our trauma. So ultimately, the responsibility does lie with us. And guess what? If you rob a bank, you're going to jail. If you rob a bank, you're going to jail. Our actions have consequences. So the subconscious really has such a powerful influence on our behavior. But if you hurt someone, you're going to pay a price. That's just how it is. And a lot of people are capable of refraining from certain, not everyone, but a lot of people are. So, it's complicated. It really is. But ultimately, we can fix our trauma. We know that from our own experience. Jon knows that from his experience.
Which is right. But in the minority, it's not always the case.
But in all cases, isn't it that the abuse or the trauma may not be your fault, but your healing is your responsibility?
Yes.
100%. That's the smartest thing I've heard come out anyone's mouth besides Jonathan's today.
Once you get to an age of sentience, and
you decide whether it affects you or not.
Absolutely. Well, not just if it affects you, but even if it does, or even if it's suppressed.
Did you guys know that? I don't remember during what period, but 10% of our ancestors were murdered.
What?
10%. Yeah.
It was ancestors.
Everybody's. It was like during an early I'm butchering it, but I talked to a guy who wrote the book.
You want to wonder why, even after you clear all your toxic shame, you still have a little approach anxiety with women. Trauma goes down through lineages and through DNA, epigenetics, all of that.
That's why our subconscious works the way. That's one of the reasons our subconscious works the way it is, because
why we have anxiety, fight or flight, all that.
It was useful for the subconscious mind to interpret a lot of things as threats because of that problem. So it's like they've got pieces of the puzzle here, but they just haven't linked them all together.
Yeah, they're like wrong on 90%, and then like 10%. It's like, that's actually right. That's a good observation. So
they have no foundation to build on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's why we have a show. We're educating people every day. I think that's all that we'll watch. It's been a pretty good chunk here. And kind of the main point is just to say, oh, wow, this is what's out there. This is the work we have cut out for us to educate these people and get them where they're actually understanding this. Because when you understand these concepts and then use them, it's just look at Jon MLD 4 years ago on his show compared to now. Such a big, and by the way, his income's 10 times higher than it was 4 years ago. There's that too. And I remember him specifically saying on a show he used to have poverty mindset. We got the poverty mindset out of him, and then his income just went to the moon. So it helps. This massively helps once you understand these concepts. That's why we have show educating people. Any final comments? Anything you guys have to say, would like to comment on?
Nothing for me. I've said enough today.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think just the last point is just realize if you're watching this show, nobody's gonna probably agree with you, as you've probably seen on the podcast.
Yeah, once you learn this stuff and actually understand these concepts and know the truth, you're one of a select few.
Ryan, we lost your camera.
Yeah, I know. All right, so I think we're about ready to wrap up anyways, but
my last thought would be, I'm optimistic in saying that if people understand, I think people are open to the ideas we're talking about. I think because they've correctly, you see a lot of them correctly identify a lot of the issues with cognitive behavioral therapy. So I would encourage, I doubt Pearl's ever going to watch this show, but if you do, we're willing to have that conversation. I think any of us are more than willing to go on a show like that and describe the things that we understand and we learn about the subconscious mind. And I do believe that most people, once they understand it, are really open to these ideas, and they become really big fans of this stuff. I mean, how many times have we had clients that were skeptical about what we were doing come in, and then their mind is blown. They're like, I never thought this was possible.
Oh, I got dozens and dozens and dozens.
It happens all the time.
It's a roadmap. Once you understand, you can start reading the map.
Yeah, I mean, go on my YouTube channel, just watch the client interviews. I got a pretty good chunk, almost 20 at this point of the hundreds, and they're talking about personal stuff most people don't want to talk about, but it's helped them so much. They're willing to do these very personal interviews, make it public. And these people have massive, massive changes. That's why we're doing this. That's why I quit my very high paying job to do it full time, because I mean, this is the next big thing. As far as, self-belief, helping people up level in life, this is the next big thing. We're doing everything we can to take it big. So any other final comments?
Nope. Have a great day, everybody.
All right. That's our show. Learn this stuff, and then you're going to learn what everyone here has learned after you figure out how your subconscious mind works, and then actually use these steps to up level your life and get what you want and have a much higher quality, better, happier, more confident, more successful life. You're going to then know what we know, that you actually have more power than you know. That's our show. Thank you.